The journey of caring for a loved one who is living with dementia can be quite challenging. The aim of this podcast is to make caregiving less daunting and more fulfilling. On this platform, we share knowledge, understanding, and experiences. We enlighten, give hope, and encourage, and in the process, create positive awareness about different aspects of dementia. Welcome to my podcast, Dementia Caregivers Corner. My name is Julia Ratladi. Dementia Care, how deep is your love?
My guest in today's episode is someone who has guided countless families through one of the most difficult and emotional journeys, making decisions about senior living and memory care for a loved one. Today, we'll be talking about dementia care, including early signs, family challenges, and preparing for memory care. Our guest is the author of Senior Living Made S.I.M.P.L.E. She created a toolkit that gives families clear, practical steps to navigate the senior living journey with confidence. She's also the founder of the Senior Living S.I.M.P.L.E brand, where she had built a reputation for simplifying complex decisions and guiding families with compassion. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome in today's episode Shari Ross, all the way from the US.
Hello, how are you? Thank you, Julia. It's so nice to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. It's so wonderful to be with you in the UK here, even though I'm way back here in California.
I think 3 episodes ago, I was speaking with Sharon Lockett. She's the author of the book called Until My Memory Fails Me. She lives with mild cognitive impairment, and she's there in the US as well. So we were just sharing on the podcast, and she said her husband is the first person who took notice of what was happening with her, like those small things that she would forget. Her husband took notice of that. So I want to come to you and ask you this. What are the very first steps that a family should take when they begin noticing memory issues in a loved one? For example, Sharon's husband, what should have she done when she noticed that Sharon have some memory lapses?
Yes, well, it's amazing that Sharon's husband, did pick up on things because sometimes they are very hard to capture. But the very first step is, like he did, I guess, just to pay attention, and document what you're noticing. So dementia doesn't really show up at once. It creeps in with very small things like forgetting appointments or repeating the same story in a conversation or getting lost when you're on a familiar route, right? Families oftentimes they'll brush these off as, senior moments, but when they become a pattern, that's what's worth noting. So I encourage families to keep a journal, just a simple journal, write down dates, examples, changes that you observe. For example, mom asked what day it was 5 times in 2 hours, or dad got confused paying for groceries. And having that record helps you track the progression and provides real evidence when you do talk with a physician. And then the next step, you want to do a medical evaluation. Not all memory issues are dementia. They can be caused by something totally reversible, like a medication side effect or thyroid problems, vitamin deficiencies, dehydration, or even a urinary tract infection. But, once you do find out that it is certainly dementia or mild cognitive impairment, the early diagnosis really, really matters. You want to make sure that you detect early so that you have time to plan financially, legally, emotionally. It allows also the person with memory loss to be involved with decision making before the disease actually takes that ability away. So So the first step is notice and then document and then evaluate. And don't wait, don't dismiss, and don't assume.
I'm here thinking, say, for example, I'm with my grandma. Obviously, I'm not looking out for signs like that, right? What would
Yeah.
get me to notice if I'm not looking for anything in that regard?
You know what? I think that when it does start to become prevalent, that even if you're not looking, you will notice. I mean, if you know a person well and you know how your grandmother speaks to you and typically what her language patterns are, or if she typically does tend to just, be able to recall names and places and people, you'll kind of get a little inkling, I believe, if you know a person well, that there is a little bit something off. Trust your gut, trust your gut. If you notice that the person is off a little bit, it may not be dementia, but trust that there might be something that you need to get evaluated and double check on. Unfortunately, sometimes it does lead to a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment or dementia. And you're going to see the mild cognitive impairment first before you notice any sort of, dementia. That's much precedes the disease. So that's where you want to step in as quickly as you can once you do notice it, so that you can make sure that your loved one gets the proper treatment.
Yes. Again, I'm thinking how hard or challenging it can be just to come to you, Shari, and tell you that I'm noticing 1, 2, 3 about you, especially something which is an illness.
I know. It's hard. I know. My mother-in-law, just recently in the last year, I noticed that she's having a hard time finding her way around places where she normally drives. So I actually mentioned to my husband, I'm like, you know what, let's have a sit down. I mean, this is all very recent. So I'm like, we need to have a sit down. We need to find out, what's going on. Her hearing has also gone a little bit bad. So in that could be a symptom, or it could be a reason why, she's having some issues. Hearing is a big component of memory loss. It can cause it. It can, shadow it. It can hide it. Whatever the case is, memory loss is often preceded by hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just really pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Just notice. And yes, it is hard to discuss with people, but you want to just, sprinkle it into conversations, ask questions. Don't, accuse. Oh,
Yes.
you seem like you keep forgetting or saying the same things over and over. Don't do that. just kind of, hey, if you notice that you repeated that story a few times, and kind of plant a little seed. But it's going to take several conversations in order to really, get that through to somebody before they actually maybe take it seriously or really start thinking about it themselves.
Right. No, thank you. Very clear.
Good.
Yeah. Let's keep into care. Sometimes many family caregivers, they feel torn in between, like keeping their loved one. See, right now we are at a dementia stage, right? And now you want to decide whether you should keep your loved one at home or consider a memory care. How can they know when home care cannot do it anymore?
Yeah, this is really one of the hardest crossroads that families will face. Caregivers feel protective, right? They feel guilty. They think that moving their loved one means that they failed. But honestly, the truth is that the decision isn't about love, it's about safety and sustainability. There's really three main indicators that to tell you maybe should consider moving a loved one to a memory care community. So first one is your loved one's safety, right? If they're wandering outside at night or leaving the stove on or missing medications, showing poor judgment with strangers or money, it's not safe anymore. I mean, one daughter I worked with, she had a mom who was still very social, and she loved playing cards. She would do all the normal things, but she kept leaving food on the stove. And then the daughter would lay awake at night, terrified that the house is going to burn down. But she felt guilty even considering memory care for her mom. But when her mom did eventually move, something really surprising happened. Not only was she safer, she was happier. She was around people regularly. She was eating regular meals. She was participating in more activities. And then her daughter, ended up saying, I finally can sleep through the night. And mom has a busier social life than I do. And I don't have to worry about her leaving anything on the stove. So safety. So number two, caregivers' well-being. right? So if the spouse or the adult child is sick or depressed, snapping, in anger or frustration, which does happen, or, crying in the car before they go inside the loved one's home, then caregiving has potentially become too much. There in the United States, AARP has found that over 60% of caregivers for someone with dementia report a really high stress level. And then, even more than a third have said that it has impacted their own health. So if caregiving is destroying your health, then home care is probably not enough any longer. And then the third thing, the need for structured stimulation, right? So when a loved one moves from mild cognitive impairment into dementia, or even in the MCI stage, they need the right level of social, physical, and cognitive stimulation and engagement. So at home, it's easy to default to the TV, right? To sitting there in front of the TV. But in memory care communities, the activities are very tailored, whether it's music, therapy, art, chair yoga, puzzles, tactile things that can keep the brain active without overwhelming them. So, you want to find that just right balance where your loved one can be doing things that are challenging and can stretch the brain a little bit, but are not going to be frustrating. And then they're kind of in a better place for their own sake. So if safety's gone, caregivers breaking down, or your loved one needs more stimulation that you cannot provide for them at home, it's time for more support. And it's not failure, it's love in action, is what I call it.
I love that. Yeah. You talked about the safety concerns. I watched this video where this couple were both living with dementia. Mm-hmm. So when the daughter came in to check on them, or actually because they've got some cameras in the kitchen, when the daughter came in and checked the footage of the camera, she found that the parents were using a toilet brush in the kitchen.
Oh,
yeah, just washing dishes. Yeah. When you look, it's hilarious when you look at it from outside.
I know. You kind of have to laugh, right? I mean, it's not funny, but it's funny, and that's the whole thing. Keep it light. Had they already used the toilet brush in the bathroom too, or?
Yes.
I hope not.
Yes, that is yes, that is funny, but not funny. And
right.
There was one where this book that I'm reading now on sensory perception or impairment and dementia, one shared a story of where the mom ate out of date food because you know how dementia affects sense of smell, sense of sight. Yes. So the question that I want to ask you is, what are some of the biggest safety risks you have seen when dementia progresses?
Yes.
Yeah. What can families do before we even reach a crisis point?
Yeah. Like I had mentioned earlier, the wandering is a big one. So about 6 in 10 people with dementia are going to wander at some point. And so if you're finding your loved one outside at 3 a.m., wearing slippers, convinced that they're going to work, that's dangerous. So you want to have your door alarms, your GPS devices and locks, but those are temporary solutions and they really don't replace the supervision that your loved one needs at that point. Kitchen hazards, like we mentioned, the forgotten pans, the burners left on, food left in the oven. I mean, you don't want to have a fire in the house. And then really importantly, medication errors. So skipping doses or doubling doses or mixing the pills. One daughter I worked with discovered that her mom had just put all her medications into candy bowls, thinking they were mints. I know. And that could have been really deadly. So another thing people don't think about too is isolation, right? So at home, a lot of people with dementia, they'll spend hours in front of the TV. Eventually they sleep too much because they're just not being stimulated correctly. The brain needs structured engagement to slow the decline of dementia. There's a lot of research that shows that particular specific structured engagement does slow decline. So social interaction and music, movement, games, and memory care communities build these activities into the day. So they're giving stimulation at the right level so that their residents don't get overwhelmed. But I would say the way to prepare before a crisis is to walk through a loved one's home with safety eyes. So ask, would I leave a toddler here unsupervised? And if the answer is no, then you need to put support in place, whether that's home care, in-home care, or respite, or eventually memory care.
Say, for example, now, in this example that I was giving of this two lovely couple in their kitchen, say, for example,
oh boy.
Yes. Say the daughter maybe decide now to take them into a care home, right? Maybe one of the daughters decide to take them into a memory care, as you call it in your country.
Yes.
What I want to talk about is that now they are they are deciding still to take that person into a care home. I had a guest in my podcast who is in the UK here. She is the author of the book called Sleeping Aware, One Man's Battle with Alzheimer's. She was the main caregiver for the dad, and the siblings lived abroad. So when they came to visit, they'll find the dad in a good state. Like, short timing, where there's a concept called short timing dementia, where someone who lives with dementia, they try to behave well when there are visitors, even though they are struggling most of the time. So that kind of a situation where the people visit and they found him okay. And so they were like, but we can't take him into a care home because he is okay. I want you to talk to families such as Lee's family. What advice would you give to them, these adult children who don't always agree on care decisions?
Yeah, I mean, sibling disagreements are so common. That was one of the main things I saw. And, usually the child that lives close by and is more on top of things sees the day to day and sees all the struggles. But the other sibling, perhaps the one living far away, like you said, she comes and she seems fine to me, and then that leads to all these resentment and fights. But what we do know about dementia is that it's not a straight line. Somebody with dementia can be pretty seemingly just fine one day or an hour of the day or 10 minutes of the day or for a week and then sort of decline, and there's dips and valleys. And so for a sibling that does not live close by and only sees the loved one here and there, they may not witness what is actually going on. So my advice is definitely twofold. So one, I would say bring in a neutral party, whether that's a doctor or a social worker or a senior living consultant. When a physician says your mom is no longer safe at home, it carries a lot more weight than the sibling's opinion, right? So you want to look at it like that way. So facts diffuse fights. Facts diffuse fights. So make sure you get the facts and you get somebody reliable who can actually be the judge of that. Also, I would say try to divide responsibilities so that not one sibling has to do everything, because that can also bring up a lot of resentment. So maybe one sibling handles the finances, the other handles the coordination of medical appointments, another manages the legal paperwork. So when roles are clear, there's definitely less fighting. And so you pick the sibling that knows how to do those particular jobs the best. So yeah, I worked with two brothers, one who lived local, one long distance, and they could not agree on the dad's care at all. They were just at each other's throats. And the local brother was just burned out, just over it. And then the long distance brother thought everything was fine, But after they brought their dad to the doctor, had a care evaluation, and they started touring the memory care communities together. They finally they agreed, they got on the same page and they actually saw, the same picture. And they still didn't agree on everything, but at least they stopped fighting about the reality of what was happening. So the key is about to make, again, go back to facts and roles and not emotion and blame, if possible. It's not always.
No, it's not always. It's funny how I've been with families where dementia caregiving has brought them together, and I've been with families where it has divided them to a point of no return.
Exactly. Even, in my own family, my stepmom was just telling me a story about that with her sister, who my stepmom lived nearby their mother. and was the one who was kind of doing the daily stuff. And then the other sister really didn't see much of anything. So my stepmother said, no, she does need to go to a memory care community. Other sister said, absolutely not. She's fine. She can go to independent living. So my stepmom was like, no. And then so finally they got together with the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed mom and said, nope, she does have to go to memory care. And so they actually did mend their relationship over time. They did see that it was the best possible thing for their mom. And, but yeah, it does not always work out that way, unfortunately.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, human
Humans.
relationships.
Yeah, they're complicated.
Yes, this other family that I cared for, I supported their mom. There were 3 boys and 1 lady. So it was mostly like the lady was the one who carried the family, and it took a toll on her, Shari.
I'm sure.
I've actually read many articles. I think you mentioned that on the dementia caregivers experiencing more burnout compared to caregivers of other illnesses.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I want to ask you, what should family caregivers be looking for? Like, what are signs that would show them that you have reached a breaking point, girl? Do
Oh,
something
yeah.
about your life.
Yes, well, for sure. I mean, there's declining health, right? So weight loss, maybe you skipped doctor's appointments. Oh, I don't have time. I have to deal with this. I don't have time for myself to go to the doctor. Or you're getting sick a lot, noticing there's a lot of frequent illness going on. Emotional strain, like you're snapping a lot, you're irritable, often crying, you're withdrawing socially, and then physical exhaustion, right? So falling asleep during the day, maybe you're up all night with your loved one. So now you are falling asleep during the day, you're exhausted. There could be constant fatigue. I once worked with a wife who was caring for her husband, and she was so devoted, and she just ignored her own health until she fainted in the grocery store. And that was her body saying, enough, enough. And, there's a lot of research that shows dementia caregivers specifically are at the highest risk for depression, anxiety, and unfortunately, even early death compared to non caregivers. So, if the caregiver's health is declining, and deteriorating, then the arrangement is no longer sustainable. And getting help is not optional. It's critical for both parties, for both the caregiver and for the person suffering with dementia. So don't feel guilty at that point. You have to, take care of yourself, or you can't possibly take care of your loved one. It's so true. In my practice, I kept seeing all these spouses, especially, or even the adult children, really getting sick quite a bit and not taking care of themselves. And, I actually have a friend who literally yesterday told me that her dad just had a heart attack, who he was caring for his wife who has dementia. Well, now who's going to help who? I mean, you got to take care of yourself,
Exactly.
or that's a problem.
Yes. I guess when you are in that moment, you don't say it, but us outside, like you are just killing yourself. Just
Yeah.
take a step back, you know.
Get
But
support. Get
yes,
support from
get
other
support.
people.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Don't do it yourself.
yes. But there are some situations, again, Shari, where the person living with dementia themselves don't want to go into a nursing home or a
For
memory care
sure. For sure.
facilities. There are some situations like that. I had one lady that I supported who told the daughter or the family that I would rather die than go into a care home.
Yeah.
I think you and I, we are aware that there are memory care facilities that are excellent out there.
Amazing.
And yes,
Yeah.
and there are others that are not so excellent. you know,
Correct. Absolutely.
what is it that people have just put in their head to say, I'm not going into a care home because of the myths that are out there? Please correct them.
Yeah. I think that the biggest myth I hear is that memory care is like the old timey nursing homes that they used to have, back in the 60s and 70s, that were depressing and cold and dark and clinical, right? Where there's a whole like long hallway with a bunch of people just sitting in wheelchairs, drooling and waiting to die, and the reality and nowadays is very different. There's modern memory care communities out there that are really built for safety and dignity and engagement. And residents, like I said, do art and therapy, gardening, like exercise, baking, even pet visits. There's all these wonderful things. So it's not like the old days with the fluorescent lights and just cold, tile floor.
Yes.
They've improved. Another myth is that, I hear people all the time say, if I move my loved one, then I'm giving up, right? They wanted to stay home. They told me they want to stay home and they're home forever. And yeah, I get it. Like a lot of people do. Of course, we all want to stay home. Most of us do. But in reality, I've seen people with dementia thrive after moving way more than they ever were when they were at home. I've met so many people who swore they would never leave. And then within weeks of moving, eventually when they did move, they had groups of friends and joined painting classes, and it had just so much more purpose than you'd have in the home. And, I've had adult children say, she's got a busier social life than I do, even in memory care. So, memory care communities, it's not about shutting life down. It's about keeping life meaningful and safe and dignified. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, still misconceptions about the realities of what memory care can be. But in reality, for some people, for many, many people, it can be a beautiful experience and it can improve the quality of their life immensely.
Mm. Okay. And you're telling the truth there. This lady that I was giving an example of, she apparently the reason why she didn't want to go into a care home is because her mom was many, many years ago. She thought that the care that was given to her mom was enough. So she didn't want to be part of it. Exactly what you've just said.
Yes.
I want us to talk about your brand. What is it about the book that you wrote? Who is it for? How do you assist people? What kind of people would say, I want to use your services?
Correct. So over many, many years, over a decade, I worked with families who would come into a memory care community or assisted living community when they unfortunately were typically in a crisis mode where maybe a loved one was in the ER at 2 a.m. or had walked out the front door that last night, and they're trying to figure out what to do next. And it's not a clear road for many people because, you haven't done this before in most cases. You haven't dealt with all this. But my book that I wrote is really primarily about prepping and planning and having the information readily available so that you're not in a situation where there's complete chaos and panic, so that you can be ready for something that may happen. Because inevitably, we are all aging, we are all getting older. And so we are all going to need some planning in order to have a smooth fourth quarter, right, in our lives, whether it's we have dementia or just have other issues as we age. So nowadays, I speak one-on-one, whether through Zoom or on the phone, all over the country with the loved one, whether it's an adult child or the entire, family, the siblings, whoever it may be that is trying to navigate this whole maze of senior living and memory care. And so it could come to me, years before to talk about, what are the things they need to do to prep and plan, whether that, means paperwork or just how to have a conversation with a loved one, how to know when it's time to look into memory care or community. Or it could be when they're in the throes of it and they need a hand and they need somebody to just walk them through it as a friend, as a partner. I am not a doctor. I'm not a clinician, but I have dealt with and worked with families for so many years that I know what to look for. I know all the pitfalls. I know what they need to know. And I do everything with a touch of humor to keep things light and to keep people's spirits up because it is such a difficult time. But, if you use stories and you use prior examples of things that you've witnessed and other families and what they've gone through and some of the funny things that have happened, which I jotted down all these stories over the years of residents that I saw, or what funny things even with families as they were navigating all of this. So it's important to kind of lighten up the mood a little bit. But that's primarily what I'm there for, is to hold their hand and walk them through the whole process. It is a scary, scary time in most people's lives. And it's very confusing. And it's, very normal that people feel a lot of guilt and a lot of anxiety and they're scared. So I'm a person that's going to be there for them in that time.
Because sometimes when you are not in the situation, you will not know the extent to which it's going to drain you of everything that you have until you get in there. That's when you realize that. So, but I'm not getting this one. This book that you have, who is it for?
It could be either for the adult child. It could be for the spouse of somebody who may have dementia or may need more care. It could be for the actual senior if they maybe are on their way to dementia, talking about, signs and symptoms and things to look for and what steps to take next, who to talk to, where to go, and the realities of it all. And in the book, I speak pretty frankly. It's very straightforward so that people know exactly what to do and when to do it and how to do it. But yeah, so the family members typically are the ones who will read this book. Okay. There's a workbook that goes along with it that has all the checklists and journal prompts as well that go along with the book so that they can put all of these things into action in an organized fashion so that it kind of is a very less complicated task ahead.
Right. Where is it available? Where do we get it from?
Yeah, you can get the book and the workbook on Amazon.com in every country. And you can also find the book on I don't know if you have Goodreads in the UK, or BarnesandNobles.com, Walmart.com. So all the places you can buy a book online. And you can also go to my website where you can sign up for one-on-one consultations. So we have different packages of times and lengths and how far in depth you need to go. So you can go to seniorlivingmadesimple.com. It's the name of my book. And that's where you can find me and the rest of that information.
Yes, I actually put some of the links on the notes in this podcast. So any final word, anything that I haven't asked you that you think will assist our listeners?
Yeah, I think if I could give caregivers just one piece of advice to make this journey feel less overwhelming, which it is inevitably going to be, but maybe if we can lessen that a little bit, I would just say don't do it alone. Too many caregivers wait until they're completely burned out before asking for help. It's not a sign that you're giving up if you ask for help. So build your support system now, and that could be family, it could be friends, it could be professional caregivers or support group. Start building that. And, just understanding that caregiving for someone with dementia is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So if you try to do it all yourself, you're going to break. And if you ask for help, it ensures that your loved one is going to be cared for and you're still standing as well. And you just have to strike that balance. And I think that's what every caregiver needs. But just know you're not alone.
Thank you very much. Of all the more than 55 million people worldwide who are living with dementia, they really, really need support.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Shari, for your time. Let me take this time to thank you, our dear listeners, for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed our conversation with Shari or you are passionate about dementia care, please consider leaving a review and sharing this episode with someone who might benefit from it. Your support helps us reach more and more people and raise awareness about dementia-related issues. Until next time, take care and bye for now. Ta-da! Dementia care. How deep is your love?